Welcome, folks, to a long overdue session of Check-In with the Doctor. I am, of course, Chris White, your host, and I feel like I need to reintroduce myself. I've sort of been silent in the certainly the LinkedIn world for 4 or 5 weeks. I am absolutely delighted to welcome this week's guest. In fact, the person paying the most attention is me, because she's got some lessons that I need to learn. My guest today is Janice B. Gordon. She is the customer growth expert. She runs a business called Scale Your Sales, and she's just an absolute delight. Janice, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Oh, I'm feeling good. Thank you for inviting me, Chris. It's a real honor. I'm looking forward to this.
And I have to say, I just love your accent. And share with the listeners, clearly it doesn't sound like me. Share with the listeners where it is that you're from.
Yes, I'm based in London. My backdrop, you can't see it all. And so I've got St. Paul's there to remind you, it is not Capitol Hill. Capitol Hill is based on our St. Paul's Dome. But yeah, no, I'm in London near the Olympic Park. The Olympics is on, not here. So yeah, that's my home base, but I love traveling around the world, meeting my audience and sharing my knowledge with people. I just love people to take action, and hopefully that's what they're going to do after this.
I sure hope so. Incidentally, I get a pretty good following in Europe, because I've had a lot of people say, I'm closing out my day and I see you go live, and I click in. So incidentally, if we do have anybody who joins, I welcome you to say hello. I invite you to ask Janice any questions. Janice, may I ask you to introduce yourself, since I said a little bit about you, but my audience may not know who you are. So can you take a minute and introduce yourself, please?
So it's Janice B. Gordon, as you say, the customer growth expert. And the reason why I'm the customer growth expert, because although I work in sales, I'm really an advocate for customers. Everything I do is about understanding your customers, standing in your customer's shoes. The book that I wrote, Business Evolution, is all about being customer focused. With Scale Your Sales, I've taken it a step further with the framework and really drilled down as to what the essential elements for B2B organizations to retain their customers. And I know we're going to go into more detail about that. So I've got Scale Your Sales framework, but also the podcast, which you're going to be on next quarter, where we talk about strategies to scaling your sales. And that is through maintaining, growing, looking after your existing customers. Through your existing customers, they refer people, and that's how you acquire.
And I have to admit, you and I were chatting before we went live. I am probably better at the acquisition, or I think I naturally focus more on the acquisition side than the retention side. And I suspect a lot of people that you deal with do. So, but before we get into some of the hows, why do you think many of us maybe in sales tend to focus more on the acquisition side? Do you sort of have a sense as to why this happens?
Yeah, I remember in the early 1990s, I worked in financial services in sales, and 8 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, we had stand up cold calling, 8 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday, stand up cold calling. We're trained as salespeople. Traditional sales is to acquire, is to sell. We're not trained, traditional salespeople, to maintain, to grow, to continue to build the relationships. Sales training hasn't changed, and the sales process hasn't changed enormously. You've got different sales methodologies, and we've tweaked around the edges, but the core of selling is really acquisition of customers. So now the focus is that buyers have moved on and they want something different. And we as sellers are trying to keep up with what their requirements are and understanding the buyer behavior. But the buyers, even B2B buyers, are still a good 2 years ahead, depending on what sector you're in. So we're still trying to keep up and adapt to, it's not about acquisitions anymore. And that's why my mantra is all about retention. because you can acquire through retention, but you keep your customers. It's the most profitable strategy that you can have. Everyone else can be doing the sales training and the acquisition and all of that. People already know how to do that. I deal with salespeople all the time. They think, what can you teach me about selling? And I say nothing, but I'm going to teach you how to be profitable. I'm going to teach you how to make it easy for yourself and retain your customers and get your customers to acquire customers for you. I'm not going to be dealing with the sales training side of things. I know you know your job, right? But I'm going to teach you everything else to make the acquisition bit of your job a lot easier.
So how different are the muscles for retention versus the muscles for acquisition? Do we have to exercise and develop different muscles and different habits to make that shift?
The best salespeople already have that muscle. The top salespeople already have that muscle. They understand this. So if you look to who are the top salespeople, you will see the way that they're acting different is that they're very much focused on the customer. They're very much focused on the service. They're very much focused on retaining that customer. They get a lot of their business out of their existing customers. So they're already doing it. Yeah.
What is it that defines customer centricity? And what I mean by that is I feel like those are words that are used a lot. And I feel like there are a number of companies that I think they claim to be customer centric. I'm not sure that shows itself in reality or in their interactions or the customer interaction. So how do you define and help your clients actually implement a customer-centric approach?
It's easier for a new company, a startup, to be a customer-centric company than an existing long legacy organization to do that, because they've been on the sales side. And but the way that I do it when I go into organizations, I start with the customers facing the sales team, then the customer facing team, anyone that can change the experience of the customer, all of those touch points, looking at the customer journey. And then I move back through the organization. So eventually the whole organization becomes customer centric. But it's not something this takes years. It's not something you can switch on a switch. And what is the motivation for doing it? In 5 years' time, if your company is not already on that change paradigm shift of the mindset of being customer focused and then having the organization behind you that is customer centric, it's a whole organization thing. If in 5 years' time you haven't even begun that process, well, I don't think you'll be here in 10 years' time. It's as simple as that, because buyers are already on that path. They have different expectations to what they had 2 years ago. The world has changed so much in 2 years. 5 years ago, you have to be on that path. So that's the way that I start with the salespeople, move into the other customer facing people. And because you can get real quick wins there, the rest of the organization think, well, why are they getting such a great return? What am I doing wrong? Now their ears want to listen to why the finance department want things in their way. And what happens is, and I've had this, is real experiences, big contract, sold like £4 million contract in Chile, and it went to the finance department and it was like, not invented here, we can't do that, and all of these blocks and barriers within the organization. They lost out to a new incumbent because it took them so long to change the organization's mechanism, because it's like, this is our product, this is that everyone else has to do it in our way, because the finance department didn't really understand what was going on in their world, and they want control of their silo, of their department. So this is why customer centricity is so important, because it doesn't matter what the salespeople do. If it's getting blocked in operations, or it's not passing through seamlessly, if it's getting blocked in finance department, any other kind of silo that's in the organization, it is not going to work. So that's why you have to start somewhere that see that there's a real benefit and work your way through the whole organization. Customer centricity is about a whole organization approach, but in changing it, you don't start with the whole organization.
Yeah, it takes one step at a time.
Yeah.
But this rings so true to me in certainly the software world. And I think, I came from a software background, and frankly, I started in 2005 and I got into sales in 2005, and we were still selling perpetual licenses. Right. And after the sale, it sort of kicked over to the professional services folks, and, the account managers were a little bit responsible, but it was more of a focus on new logo. So, but now in the software world, as we all know, it's a subscription based world. So clearly, I think this has got to resonate with the software, industry. What does this apply to all industries? Are there certain industries that you find maybe struggle with this more than others? What is your experience there?
It applies to all industry, but it depends on the type of relationship that you have. If it's more transactional, if it's lower value, then it may not be worthwhile to you. It may be worthwhile to the customer, but to you actually going down this journey. I mean, I could argue against that, but it's up to the executive team to see whether there is real value in this. So low value transactional relationships, I would move that to be online, or to put it in a marketplace. So there are different ways of dealing with that to lower your cost of engagement. Maybe you'll go down more of a wholesaler route and withdraw yourself from that so that you can actually focus in higher value areas of your business. So that's, again, it's looking at, what is your route to market? What are the strategies you have? And maybe you change some of the strategies for some sectors or to some product lines to actually make your whole organization work more efficiently, so that you can focus on your most valued customers and your higher value customers, and so that you can maintain, you can grow them, and you can secure more of them.
Yeah. And I'm writing down a few more notes, because you as you talk, I'm getting so many more questions I want to ask you. So I'm trying to keep them all together. So I love what you just said about the fact that it really has to align with your strategy, right? I mean, and that seems so obvious, but the reality is sometimes we forget, right, that some of these initiatives first have to align with the strategy. And a lot of companies that I work with, a lot of software companies, they are very focused on new logos. That's sort of their growth strategy. How do we build more of this long-term focus into a new logo strategy?
Okay. I realized there was a question that you asked before about customer centricity, and there was an example I was going to give you that, we all know, but, Amazon. Amazon is very much based upon meeting the customer's varying needs. So they acquire Whole Foods because of the varying needs, and they'll probably start acquiring property. In the UK, John Lewis, which is very much a service-based retailer, is now going into the property business because they can see value in that. But hopefully they do it with the same ethos. Now, finding out what your customers want, this is Amazon, this is customer-centric organizations, and developing the skills and resources around the customer needs. That's what it's all about. Traditional organizations, traditional sales is about having a skill or a product, resources. So they have all of these widgets, and then they go out and they find the customer. That's what you were talking about earlier, that you did. You go out and you find the customer and you try and squeeze them in to fit this product. We spend a lot of time doing that, madness, absolute madness. So that is the real difference between a customer-centric organization that's very much starts with the customer and, traditional organizations that start with the skill or the product. And that's where the change has to happen. So you were saying about how do organizations that are very much focused on new logos, how do they, look more long term? It is again, it goes back to your business strategy. Now, often you'll have You'll have venture capital in software, venture capital companies that are very much quite demanding and they want a return on their investment.
Of course.
You have to have really strong founders. And if the founders are in control of the direction of the business, and they are looking rather to make as much money and divest, but they're looking long-term growth, that's the kind of mindset that you need to have, because it is an investment. It's an investment of values, and it's an investment in your people and your resources to make sure that they are wrapped around the customer long term, and they continue to invest in researching and understanding the customer needs. That's why I gave you the Amazon example first. And we can see how Amazon are so close to the customer data, really understanding their customer, and they move where they think the customer is going, or they move where the need is. They acquire a skill, they acquire another company based upon keeping their customers happy and satisfied. That's exactly what they need to do. But you have to start with, does that the founders of the organization, do the people that have invested in the organization have that as a goal, an objective for the organization? If they don't have that as an objective for the organization, if they're not thinking long term, then actually this is not going to work. And I have actually walked away from an organization that wanted me to actually do all of these things, and I could clearly see they wanted to stack them high, and they're looking to divest. The whole reason for doing that is to increase the value of that organization, so the founders could and the investors could divest out of the organization. That isn't in the customer's interest. That's not looking long term. So if you've got those elements right, then this is something that you can follow through.
Yeah. And Janice, allow me to just pause for a moment. Folks, welcome. If you've joined us, I'm speaking with Janice B. Gordon today. She runs a company called Scale Your Sales. We're talking about customer-centric growth and retention over acquisition, or at least balancing retention and acquisition. And by all means, if you care to say hello or have any questions for Janice, please feel free to chime in. Janice, you said something that triggered another thought for me, and that is, as a salesperson, and we're talking about what can we do to be customer centric, even in the early stages of a relationship with a new customer. Even if we're focused on building new logos, we can have a long-term perspective. Are there things that we can and or should be looking for with some of the prospects that we're dealing with that might give us an indication as to whether or not they are interested in or looking for a long-term because my perspective is it's a two-way street, right? Into every relationship is a two-way street, right? Are there certain scenarios in which maybe the prospects you're dealing with aren't really interested in developing a long-term relationship? And is that something that maybe we should look for if we truly want to take this approach?
Absolutely. Now, remember what I said about the investors in the organization and the founders. You, as a salesperson, need to research the prospect organization in exactly the same way. You need to find out if the founders of that organization you want to sell to are wanting to divest, so they're looking short term. Are there investors are looking to divest, so they're looking short term? So it doesn't matter if the people within that organization love you and are talking long term, the actual organization is going to disappear from underneath them. So you need to look at those things as well. So it's all down to the research and the customer. Have full and frank conversations. After all, you've got nothing to lose. They're not yet your customer. You can say, this is a sense that I'm getting from the organization. Obviously, you've got to do it in a tactful way. You're saying, I'm interested in your organization, interested in, working with you sometime in the future. Is it all right if I kind of check in with you and offer you information? I'd like to build a relationship. We're not talking about selling at that point. They're prospects. You're having a human to human conversation. If you're able to offer them value, I really like quoting Gary Vaynerchuk. His book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. I think I did my left and my right wrong. And I call this give, 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 and then ask permission. It's not asking for the sale, it's asking permission. So, even with your prospects, you need to offer value. You need to research them enough and find out, actually, I think it would be worthwhile them talking to someone else I know within my network. Do you mind if I connect to you both? What are they going to say? No? Or offering them a report or something because you're staying close. If you're targeting a high value customer, you should be stalking them for 6 months to a year before you're directly contacting them. Certainly not connecting with them. They often say connect and build the relationship. I say build the relationship first. The way you build the relationship, and this is my scale your sales attraction strategy, doing the research and finding your prospects or your existing customers, but you're continuing to engage. So you engage by popping up in their timelines, by commenting on the things that they post. So they're thinking, who's this person that's always not paying me compliments, but offering value, that are commenting on the things. You are not even connected with them at that stage. Guess what? When you do connect with them, they're going to think favorably of you because you've already been offering value. Then when you connect with them, it's a lot easier at some point, not at that moment as soon as you connect, to actually have a conversation with them because they know you've been offering value. Then at some point when you feel the relationship is strong enough, having a conversation with them. And that's how you nurture, you attract, nurture the relationship. Now, even if it's an existing relationship, what often happens is people do not continue to do that, and you must continue to do that. You must continue to pop up, so you'll be always front of mind. So you're reading their posts, you're commenting on their posts, you're offering them value, you're helping them to make connections. So it doesn't matter whether they're prospects or whether they're existing customers, you're continuing to nurture and engage them. And so I'm not sure if I answered your question. I may have gone off the point a little bit, but please do pull me back if I haven't. I get so excited about all
No, this is fantastic. And by the way, I mean, we could have entitled this entire conversation, Give, Give, Give. I mean, that is such a good message. And you mentioned, particularly after you develop a relationship or after they become a customer. And I have to admit, like, I'm sitting here thinking, gee, I think there's a few clients that I haven't, reached out to in a while. And there's a few clients that I need to reach out to. And if any of them are listening, I apologize that I haven't reached out in a while.
I'm thinking of you now. So find something that is relevant and of value to each one of those customers. And, don't just send them a LinkedIn message. Do it in a variety of ways. Be more imaginative and creative. One person, you might send them a card. So another person, you might send them a £5 Starbucks coffee card on me, been thinking about you, hope all is well. Another person might be a LinkedIn voice message. Another person might be a video. You've got to look, life is hard, isn't it? If you're not having fun doing what you do, by thinking of new ideas and ways to do it, that's actually going to be different, not another email. How many emails do we get?
Exactly.
Too many emails. So don't do it in an obvious way. Do it, I'm thinking of you, and do something that's fun and offer them value. You will become, even if you haven't spoken to them for a whole year, I mean, that's understandable. 2 years, that's also understandable. A lot's been going on. We've been pretty busy. The fact that you do it in a memorable way will mean that they've forgotten the fact that it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Absolutely. Hey, send them a link to this video, for crying out loud. I mean, if this doesn't get them, fired up, nothing will. So I have to ask you, you mentioned this a moment ago. You have so much passion and you speak with so much passion and energy. And I sense that that's just who you are and part of your personality. But I also sense, and I know this of myself, when I wrote my book and I put together my material, it was largely based on what I experienced in my career and some of the things that I learned along the way. My guess is that you've had some experiences maybe early in your career that really lit a fire under you for this whole idea of customer centricity, long-term relationships, and growth. Is that a true statement? Am I guessing that right? And are there certain things that you sort of learned in your career that really energized this passion for what you coach and teach now?
Yeah. In the 1990s, when I was doing, cold calling, selling, financial services, and all of that, I was taught sales in the traditional way. But I built relationships because I was interested in people. I wanted to know their story. So although I may have had managers in my lifetime that just wanted me to sell, I kind of like my heart, when that was pushed upon me, my heart went out of my work, and my heart has to be in my work. And that's eventually why I kind of left the kind of traditional sales industry. But strangely enough, I then went to work for a customer experience organization. I was a customer experience consultant, and oh boy, that completely changed everything for me. So I was doing customer experience journeys for various organizations, AOL, HSBC, and then putting together their customers with their designers or marketing people and getting them to do a journey. And the people that may have designed the portal have designed it in a particular way. But the customer always finds the shortcut, always find the quickest route to it. And the designer wasn't allowed to say anything. They just had to watch what the customer did. And the designers came back completely, because, they had a bit of ego. This product is amazing. They realized, actually the customers, what I learned was customers are your best innovators and creators. The problem is, whether you're a small or large companies, what I find when I go and ask them, when was the last time you asked these questions to your most valued customers? Then you often get a blank. But they are your innovators and creators. They are your best sales team. Why aren't you speaking to them on a regular basis? And it's regular what's relevant and useful to the customer. Even on my podcast, when I've interviewed people, there are those that will set up brainstorming with their top sales, not top buyers within an organization, and the brainstorms are so good. It's like there's no agenda. We're not selling, we're just talking, and we're just talking through and working through a problem. And the sales organization may bring a tech person with them, and then the buying organization may say, oh, I've got to invite this person. One, they might want to impress them, but two, there's real valuable ideas that are created. Selling now is all about co-creation. It's not about you. Remember I said about traditional sales is that you have a skill and a product and you're trying to get the customer to fit it. It's none of that anymore. It's actually about, there are two people and we want one objective, right? We've got two sides of the same coin. And the objective is that you are going to give them something that the buyer can sell to their customer. So we've all got the customer's customer in mind, but you as a salesperson have got to go through the buyer to actually get to that customer, and the buyer needs to go through you as a sales supplier to get to their customer. So you can see actually you both want the same thing. So now let's sit down and co-create how we're going to best serve the customer, because that's ultimately what we want. The problem is that salespeople often think only of the buyer. They think very short term, and actually it may please the buyer, but actually they've lost out on the bigger opportunity that would serve the customer better and actually embed the customer's organization longer term with the customer. If we only change this widget to do this as well, because the research that the selling organizations come up is, this is the way your customer's moving, and this is what I think would be good, and this is how much value you would get out of it. That's going to be an easier sell.
Those words are so powerful. I mean, I am going to pull out the last 5 minutes and blast that all over. I mean, the comments of customers are your best innovators, customers are your best salespeople. Again, I said in the opening, I'm paying more attention than anybody. I feel like I'm getting a free training session here. It makes me realize that I need to go back to and anybody listening, I suspect, is realizing that they need to go back to their customers and just sit down and have a conversation. What can we do better? Where can we help you? And this notion that sales today is co-creation, you're 100% right. And as I even think about some of probably my last 3 or 4 clients, and that's precisely how we've operated. I mean, such powerful words. Now, we've danced around COVID a little bit. And you've mentioned how things have changed so much in the past couple of years. How has COVID and the pandemic, and now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. I know Europe is starting to have some issues again. I think we're starting to have some issues in the US again. How has the pandemic changed what we need to do to develop these long-term relationships and nurture this customer-centric approach?
In the way that it's changed, it's become essential now. If you do not have relationships, and that's what I call personal, professional relationships with your customers, if you do not understand the needs of your customers, if you don't understand the organizational needs and direction that they're going in, and goals and objectives, then actually you really shouldn't be in the job that you're in at the moment, because that has become essential. Salespeople are business advisors. Salespeople are customer relationship advisors. The selling bit, unless you have all of those other bits, you don't get the selling bit. Is really the 10% at the end. But everything else that you have to do as a sales person, about really listening, social listening, on the research that you need to do, even before you get the opportunity to give. And then when you get the opportunity to give, you have to continue to social listening, to be responsive to their needs. And before you can get an opportunity to ask their permission to move on to the next stage. Once you have built a relationship, and I've got this whole thing about becoming a trusted advisor and the kind of the 6-7 stages you need to go through in order to get to that, because that's going to be your objective with your most valued customers. You become an essential source for that customer, for that business. And so you need to really up your game. I'm talking to organizations and salespeople not having such big regions that territories that they need to cover, not having hundreds of customers, because if you've got hundreds of customers you need to service, then actually a lot of that needs to be going online. A lot of that needs to be looking, I talked earlier about a different business model. If you've got a valuable resource that you want to invest in as a professional salesperson, then you need to have an organization that enables them to be a professional salesperson. And so they need to have the organization that supports them in doing that research and supports them in personalizing and the messaging that goes to them. So they're really creative about the way they do that supports them in really understanding the buyers. And it's never one buyer, it's often a team of buyers. And what's changed with COVID, to answer your question, is that you have got buyers in the buying team that are not buyers. What they want are no people. They're the COVID committee. They are the people that are protecting their own customer organization and are fearful of spending money. Fearful of investing. They're looking for reasons why not. So you've got this whole new group of people that you've probably never met, probably never will meet, that have an awful lot of power, unless you really understand the way that organization operates, and unless you've nurtured sponsors or champions within that organization and they're not always in the senior management team. They're often at a much lower level, people that you've nurtured over a period of time, that you've really got a relationship, that's going to ring you up and tell you, oh, this is going on now, or this person has joined, and so you can reserve. So you don't have any new surprises when you go into that organization. You need that customer organization to be on your team as much as you're on their team.
So powerful. And I love the fact that you said it's essential now in this world. In the workshops I run, I tell people it is more important than ever before to be human in our jobs, right? And I give proof when I say you are looking into my home office and I am looking into yours, right? I mean, yeah. Our personal lives and our professional lives have been brought together like never before. And I love the term you used, personal professional relationship. And there's a line, right? We do need to be more human in our jobs, and it's okay to have it, but we also need to maintain a professional line. And I think that's just so highly valuable. Where does this, because we've talked a lot about the sales professional, and my son, actually, he's 25 and he's a young CSM, customer success manager with a software company in Charleston, South Carolina. And I work with, hundreds of other CSMs. Is the message any different for CSMs?
No, because they're customer facing. They need to work as a team. Organizations now need to have these focused teams on organizations. I also work a lot in key account management and with key account managers, but actually sales organizations, sellers need to have their internal team around them as well that are helping and supporting them and feeding them information. So, customer success is absolutely no different. They need to be seen to be part of the sales marketing, but the whole organization, because actually the whole organization owns that customer. Even the finance department, even the operations, all of that they have a responsibility to make sure that when that customer, that touch point is in their department, that they make sure that interaction is the best interaction that customer is going to have. Always, because it only needs one of those two to turn off the customer.
And it seems to me like a lot of CSMs, and I know this again from personal experience, having talked to my son. In fact, over the weekend, you mentioned too many accounts. He feels like he has too many accounts. What do you say to organizations or particular customer success leaders when maybe they're reluctant to add more customer success people, and yet maybe their customer success people don't have enough bandwidth to manage the accounts that they have?
The reason why in Scale Your Sales I have so the first one is retention. The second element is productivity. For this very reason, what happens is that one, they're focused on new logos, but two, they treat all customers the same. And you don't treat all customers the same because, the Pareto's principle, 20% of your customers bring in 80% of your revenue. And, if you kind of go down another level of that 20%, the 20%, 4% bring in 64% of your revenue. So if you have 100 or 1,000 customers, clearly some are going to be, actually they're costing you money, and some are going to be within that 64%, the 4%. I mean, wouldn't it make sense to find out where they are, along that? And then why would you treat everyone the same when you have that information? It wouldn't make sense. It's absolute craziness. So you would have levels of customer success, levels of service. And so you've got to restructure your organization so that you have different sectors that get different levels of service. It doesn't mean they get no service, but they get the kind of service that's appropriate. So, often organizations waste so much time by spamming everyone with the same message and too much of it. if you could divide up your customer into groups and segments, and you understood each of those segments better and understood the way they like to be served, and change the organization to serve them better and more efficiently, actually it's less resources that you're spending, because you really understand that segment. There's going to be different types of, but you understand this is it's not only the needs of the customer in terms of selling them a product or service, but the needs of the customer is how you serve them as well. But you've got to understand how they want to be served. So you need to do some internal analysis of your customers. And that's what I do in terms of the product. It makes the organization very much more productive. In that, now you can have customer success that's really focused on a segment and understand what is success for that segment, because it's not going to be the same for another segment. So you're often wasting time and energy in peeing off your customers by giving them what they don't want, because your organization, the supplier, will have no idea of what that particular segment needs and how it relates to and all different to other segments. And that's why it's so important.
So powerful, and your passion and energy is just palpable. In fact, I'm going to be sure to have my son listen. So Gregory, you'll be listening to this at some point. It's interesting, as you were saying that, I heard something recently that really resonated with me, and that is when dealing with prospects and customers, really anybody, but particularly in this regard, feed them what they're hungry for, right? Yeah. Feed them what they're, but how do you know what they're hungry for until you stop and listen, right? Until you make your agenda secondary, right? And make the customer first, customer centric, right? It's all about that. Folks, again, Janice, let me pause. Folks, if you happen to be with us, we're nearing the end. Janice has already given us 45 minutes, and she's just been in, and as you can tell, she is just a ball of energy and just an absolute delight. If you do have any questions as we're sort of wrapping things up, I welcome you to ask. Janice, we're nearing the end. Now, I know you've got an unbelievably powerful framework, and you've touched on a few things. We've talked about retention. We've talked about productivity. And I know you've probably touched on a few others. Is there anything else worthy of mentioning in the context of that framework, but before we start to wrap things up here?
Well, I'll just kind of run through Scale Your Sales framework. There's three elements to it: retention, productivity, and attraction. So retention is really understanding the customer's world. So this is what you were talking about in terms of listening and me, social listening. Unless you can understand what the customer wants, you can't really meet their needs. But part of that, there may be some customers, and we were also talking about this, that you haven't spoken to in a while, you want to warm them up, or you've lost them. So in that would be a win-back strategy as well, the gap analysis. There's often a gap between what this is by understanding your customers and talking to them and asking them the questions. You think, well, actually, I'm providing a great service to my customer. They'd probably rate me around 80%. In fact, Baines & Co. did this research in terms of the gap analysis. And when they went in and they asked the customers what they're, how they perceive what they're getting, it was only 8%. So that is understanding what that gap is, and that's what we do in terms of, that's our starting point for customer centric retention of Scale Your Sales. And then you can actually have a strategic intent for your customer, what you want to do in terms of aligning your organization to the customer. We've talked a bit about productivity, and that's based on Pareto's principle, segmenting, really mapping the value chain and the customer journey for each of the different segments. So you're giving them, as you've just said, exactly what they want. And then having a mutual action plan, especially for your high value clients. The last one that we didn't really mention was attraction. And attraction, you can use this in terms of finding and attracting new logos, but also, I talked about whatever you would do with new new, you've got to continue to nurture with your existing as well. So I did mention about becoming a trusted advisor, so this is about this is about engaging, which I talked about, nurturing, social listening, educating, giving them what they want, answering their implicit and explicit questions. So really anticipating their needs because you understand them, and then elevating the relationship into a partnership, which is uniquely what we do, is making sure they're there for life. Lifetime customers are the highest value customers. If you're the trusted advisor and they see that you're in a partnership, that you're co-creating, there's no reason to move, and it creates a high barrier to others trying to break in to that relationship. So, that's how it works, in that once you get to that level, they continue to recommend other people to you. So that's your new logos. That means it's a shorter sales cycle, and then you kind of like work again to build the relationship, understand the customer, put them into whatever segment, or nurture them because they've got the potential to be the really high value. So you've got to look not just now, in the future, who are going to be your high value customers? How are you nurturing them? What is the mutual action agreement? What is your promise to them? How are you doing it over a period of time? So that's how Scale Your Sales framework works.
Retention, productivity, and attraction.
Yeah,
it's so powerful. And as I said a moment ago, this is such good timing for me. I've been running workshops like crazy. I've got a little bit of bandwidth this week. You've just filled up my calendar, I think, with outreach and things that I need to be doing. So it's so unbelievably powerful. So Janice, as you know, I work with a lot of technology companies, a lot of software companies, and I typically work with certainly a lot of sales professionals, but also pre-sales, also AKA the sales engineer, more the technical experts that get engaged in the sales process. Now, in your career, have you worked with either sales engineers or a pre-sale, like a technical pre-sales sort of expert type role to help you through the sales process and the customer success process?
I have, they're not necessarily my only client, but yeah, certainly. Do you know what happens is people like what I have to say, and it's like, yeah, we need to do that, and they call you in. It doesn't, understanding how a SaaS organization works, that's the key thing. But those elements that about what I said about the founder, the investor, some of those things are more unique to this type of industry. So yeah, that's exactly what I've worked with.
Yeah. And then in your own sales career, did you ever depend on, say, a technical expert to come in and give a technical presentation or a technical demonstration sort of in partnership with you to help maybe close a business, close a deal or something of that nature?
Yes, in terms of, but this was in financial services.
Yeah.
And so you will often get the product provider that would be with you, that would do more of the technical demonstration of how that product works. You would hold the client relationship, and you've opened that up. You may select the product provider, but the product provider would be the ones that would be on the kind of closing sale with you, answering those technical questions.
And did you find that there were some who were maybe particularly good at answering the questions like in an appropriate way, and maybe others who struggled because they got too technical or too deep into the weeds?
Actually, you've made me think of, I was helping, I do professional speaking, so I kind of speak all over the world. And I was doing a presentation to a group of people. In actual fact, I've got another one to some, making them investor ready. So they're 2 years into the business. They're in Palestine, so I'm working with them in September. So it's around their sales operations, and it's just interesting the way that they describe their product. It's like, and it's actually quite useful when you're working with technical people, technical founders, to actually have somebody like myself that's very much focused on the customer. And it's like, that's just gobbledygook to me.
Exactly.
Tell me, in plain English.
Tell me what it does and why should I care?
I
I
don't
don't
need
need
to
to
know
understand
that.
how the
I don't
sausage.
need to know. I just want to know what's in it for me, right?
Exactly.
Tell me a story. So a lot in my helping people to present their story so that the customer gets it and wants it. That's the important thing. Gets it and wants it. You're absolutely right. It's like another language, isn't it? Hey,
It is.
it's like great fun. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I mean, these are the folks that I help all the time. One of my favorite sayings, you may or may not have heard me say this. Certainly most of the folks that have worked with me, he or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel. They want a hole.
Oh,
but they don't just want a hole. They want a fence or they want a tree. But they don't just want a fence or a tree. They want privacy or they want shade. Yeah, we just want to talk about the shiny shovel. Right? In fact, I literally keep a shovel in the office and I pull it out during my workshops, right? Yeah. Because it's like, stop talking about the shovel. So now, Janice, I have one final question for you. But before I get there, anything else you wanted to share about this customer focused growth approach? Anything maybe that we didn't touch on that we need to make sure we don't leave unsaid?
Well, I think that it's important to recognize that you're not doing a good enough job in really understanding the customer. And once you recognize that, then you're going to think, okay, well, how can I do a better job? But you've got to have an awareness that there is more to be done. You may have landed your biggest contract and you may be really happy now, but actually you're looking at where's your biggest contract next year or the year after. You need to start nurturing them now, identify and nurture them now. I think it's either Forrester's or I think it may have been Forrester's that said that the 20% of your top value clients now, only 20% will be your top value clients in 5 years' time. So that means 80% of the people that are bringing you revenue now, your highest value now, will not be there in 5 years' time. So my question to the audience will be, who will be there? Do you know them? Have you identified them? Are you nurturing them now?
Such great words, such great advice. And I'm writing it down because it's advice that I need to take. So your time with us and your time with me has certainly been beneficial to me. And I know you're a very busy person, so I can't tell you how much I appreciate. My last question, and it's one that most of my guests don't necessarily see coming. If you could ask me one question, what might it be?
Okay, so if I could ask you one, what is the mistake most of your clients make that you can easily resolve?
Oof. I don't know if I can easily resolve it. I can easily help.
Come on, I'm sure you can.
I think the easiest mistake is that your product demonstration shouldn't be about your product. Your product demonstration isn't as good as it could be because it's about your product. That I think that's the biggest mistake that I help people make, is that yes, you're experts in your solution and you're experts in your software or your platform, and you can tell everything there is to talk about it, right? But I get like the shovel analogy. It shouldn't be about your product, right? That's training, and training happens after we actually close a deal, right? But the demonstration and the presentation should be all about how are we as an organization going to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, right? So I'd say that's the biggest thing. If I had to say sort of a second, is sales and sales engineers are fundamentally wired differently. They don't understand each other. And I help them understand each other better, and it changes the temperature in the room. And when the temperature in the room changes between the sales organization, they just function better and they can be more customer centric. So Anyway, so I gave you sort of two answers, but that was a great question. I have to give you props. I'm glad you asked. So, Janice, you have spent almost an hour with us, and I see that Matt Elsom joined us, and Matt, he's actually he's in Europe as well. He runs a software company called Emma 3D, and he's one of the guys that tunes in often. Matt, it's good to see you. Nurturing the future sources of revenue is always important, but rarely feels urgent. Well said, Matt. That is so true. And he said Chris fixes everything, and I'm certainly not that, but
you've got your instant fan club there, Chris.
I can be flat, I'm open to flattery for sure. So Janice, obviously people can find you on LinkedIn because you and I are on LinkedIn, and it'll be all over certainly my network. But just take a moment and share again your podcast, your book. How can they get more from Janice?
Yeah, if you put my name in, Janice, don't forget the B, Gordon, on Mrs. Google will send you everywhere, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter, Janice B. Gordon, LinkedIn, Janice B. Gordon. My speaker website will scaleyourselves.co.uk, which is the framework. Scale Your Sales. I would love your listeners to go and listen to Scale Your Sales show, which on iTunes, and leave them a review. I would be very grateful if they would, and they're going to see Chris on there coming up. So yes, I would appreciate it. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me you saw us talking here, what one thing resonated with you, because I want to see that people taking action.
And I'd be shocked if there was only one thing. So Janice, thank you so much. I know infectious is not our favorite word these days, but your energy and passion is infectious, and it has absolutely been a delight. So, and anybody who tuned in, thanks so much for joining us. And if you caught the recording, thank you so much. Janice, good luck for the rest of the year, and I guess I'll see you soon on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.